Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light and this is my channel. Today we're going to talk about the I-70 Strangler. Before we get started, if you would please like this video, subscribe, leave comments. Comments are great, and share if you'd like to. Also below I'll leave the link to my new Etsy store where I sell my art. And let's get started on this, shall we? The I-70 Strangler has been wanted since June 16, 1980. They suspect that he had murdered at least 12 victims in the years between June 1980 and October 1991. The killer would choose young boys and adolescents as his victims. He would meet them in popular gay bars and other similar establishments, all within a 4-block radius in Indianapolis. Now, these boys weren't just boys hanging out in gay bars. Nearly all of them came from abusive homes and had run away or had come out to their parents as being gay, and their parents had kicked them out of the home. They were trying to survive. They were trying to earn money to live on the street. They were easy victims. They were unsuspecting victims who had lived lives that none of us would wish upon anyone. All of the victims were later found naked or partially clothed near I-70, often dumped in rivers or streams and ditches in the rural countryside. Each of them had been strangled to death. Michael Petrie was 15 years old, and he was discovered naked on June 16, 1980. Despite his young age, he was a male prostitute who spent most of his time around Indianapolis gay bars. Now, I've already explained that, but the information I've looked up and have taken information from, well, those were written, quite a while ago, and so they don't tell you about the boy's history. I have seen a documentary about this case and heard what some of these boys had gone through. And I wanted to tell you that. But it won't be said often or if at all in this information that I've written down. He was reported missing on June 7th, but 3 days later, he was observed in different parts of the city riding around in a stranger's car. The cause of death was established as strangulation. There were no traces of drugs or alcohol found in his blood. Maurice Taylor was 23. His topless corpse was found in July of 1982. While his cause of death couldn't be definitively established, the coroner suspected that he had been strangled. Taylor was homeless, and he lived in the boiler room of an apartment complex in Indianapolis. And due to his financial difficulties, he offered sexual services around the gay bars. He remained unidentified for 8 months, since his mother, who was detained in a mental institution, was unable to file a missing persons report. Delvoyd Lee Baker was a child. He was 14 years old. He was in the 8th grade. He was found semi-nude near a river in Hamilton County. While investigating his death, police located witnesses who stated that Baker was last seen on the evening of October 2nd in downtown Indianapolis and was getting in a blue van driven by a young white man with a bushy mustache. The boy's parents told the city and the police that he had been riding his bike that day to the city center on the evening of his disappearance, from where he called home at 10:30 at night. He called to tell his parents that he was going to go to the movies. This concerned his parents, they said, because they knew that he didn't have any pocket money on him. It was later established that he and a 16-year-old friend had been cruising Indianapolis gay bars to make money. He and Baker prostituted themselves for $20 to $23 per night. Now, due to the fact that several differences in comparison with other victims, being the youngest and the only black victim, Baker's homicide was considered by some police to be unrelated. Michael Andrew Riley was a 22-year-old man. He disappeared on May 28, 1983, after he visited the Vogue Theater. Now, some information says that he was at the Broad Ripple, not the Vogue Theaters. So, both nightclubs in Indianapolis. He was last seen with an unfamiliar man with whom he later left. Riley's nude body was later found in a ditch. The autopsy determined that he had been strangled, and likely the perpetrator had used a towel or some similar fabric. Eric Rutger, 17 years old. He vanished on May 7, 1985. His shirtless body was found a few days later in a stream. According to his parents, Eric was planning to attend interviews for a summer job on the day he disappeared, but he had not attended any of them. His friends and relatives denied that he was gay, and later research indicated that Eric had many friends and acquaintances who were drug addicts or traffickers. Witnesses claimed that they had seen Eric at a bus stop in the early morning of May 7th, but instead of waiting for the bus, he accepted a ride from a passing car. When he was found, he had burn marks on his left shoulder and had been strangled with a rope. Michael Allen Glenn was 29 years old, and his body was only in his underwear. He was found in a ditch. He lived separately from his parents in a trailer park located on the outskirts of Indianapolis, and he worked as a handyman, so the exact date of his disappearance could not be established. Strangulation marks, possibly from a rope, were found on his neck. He was identified 3 years after his discovery with the help of fingerprinting. Nobody came forward to identify him. James Robbins was 21 years old, and he went missing on October 15th, 1987, at about 10 o'clock p.m. Shortly after leaving his mother's home in Indianapolis, he walked to the southern part of the city. 2 days later, his naked corpse, bearing strangulation marks, were found in a ditch in rural Shelby County, near I-70. While investigating his murder, police located 2 witnesses who gave conflicting information. One claimed that they had seen a red Jeep Wrangler Renegade near the crime scene, while the other said that the car was a Chevrolet Blazer. John Paul Talbot was 26 years old, and like the previous victims, he was found strangled to death in May 1989. His body had been dumped near a stream. Stephen L. Elliott was 26 years old, and his corpse was clad in his underwear, and he was found in August 1989, again near I-70. He had been strangled by a rope. Elliott's father told the police that when his son came out as gay in 1979, he then, quote, left the family household and became involved in prostitution, and he developed an alcohol addiction. So he had been 16 when he had left his family home. Clay Russell Boatman was 32 years old. He was a licensed practical nurse. He disappeared in August of 1990 after leaving his Richmond apartment to visit Our Place, which was a local gay bar. His body, showing signs of strangulation, was found in a ditch by a group of children. near Eaton, Ohio. When interviewed about his life, Boatman's family completely denied he was homosexual. Thomas Clevenger Jr. was 19 years old, and he vanished without a trace at the end of August in 1990, and his semi-nude corpse was later found in an abandoned railroad track near Greenville, Ohio. Clevenger had grown up in a poor neighborhood of Indianapolis, and due to his rocky upbringing, he started committing crimes and drinking at an early age. By the age of 14, he attacked and then stabbed his deputy headmaster, and during his school years, he was diagnosed with a learning disability. Because of that, he could not read or write. Shortly before his death, he engaged in prostitution near gay bars to earn money, which was a fact, but it was denied by both his mother and his sister. Otto Gary Becker was 42 years old, and his body was found in a ditch next to a gravel road on October 7, 1991. While investigating his murder, police found several witnesses who claimed to have seen Becker in a car with two men earlier in the day. They were driving north on I-70 near Indianapolis. According to the witnesses, one of the men was holding Becker down while the other one was driving. The witnesses were taken to the police station and shown photographs of various criminals convicted of kidnapping and murder charges in the state, but none of them matched the alleged abductors. A task force was made of 8 police officers in 1982. Following the discovery of Riley's body in June 1983, 4 more men were included in the list of potential victims: 25-year-old Gary Davis, 27-year-old Dennis Brodsky, 21-year-old John Roach, and 22-year-old Daniel McNeve. Like the other victims, they were all gay. They visited gay bars and were killed in Indianapolis between August 1981 and May 1983. In 1983, the FBI joined the investigation, with profilers suggesting that the offender showed volatile behavior when committing the murders. Near the end, it was determined that there were at least 2 different perpetrators operating independently of each other. Because of this, Davis, Brodsky, Roach, and McNeve were removed from the list. According to the FBI, Davis, Brodsky, and Roach, and McNeve's killer was a white man between the ages of 20 and 30, worked in a job requiring low-skilled labor, was a fan of military paraphernalia, and he led a healthy lifestyle. In his everyday life, he expressed homophobic views, but was secretly a homosexual who committed the murders out of shame and self-hatred. While the other victims, according to investigators, were killed by a white man about 45 years of age, overweight, had a high-paying job, and was well respected in his community. They also concluded that the killer could possibly be married, but was not intimate with his wife, likely because of his attraction to adolescent boys and young men. He felt shame and guilt that, in addition to possibly destroying his career and reputation, it would result in deep hatred and subsequent murder. There were a couple of initial suspects. One of those was 47-year-old Duncan Patterson. He was a Florida native, and in the fall of 1982, he was arrested in Indianapolis on charges of statutory rape against young boys. And shortly before his arrest, a friend of Delvoyd Baker claimed that the former had gotten into Patterson's van. Patterson later admitted that it was true, and that he had paid Baker $20 for a sex act, which the two had done in a hotel room. He denied killing the boy, however, shocking, claiming instead that he had taken Baker, after sex, to the Indianapolis Central Library, where he let him go. To assess his credibility, he was given a polygraph test, to which he agreed and then successfully passed. While he was then convicted on charges of child molestation he was officially excluded as a suspect. But then came along Herb Baumeister. There were a few more suspects, but they were all brushed to the side. They didn't think that they had done it, even though they were terrible people who had committed terrible crimes. Herb Baumeister. In February of 1998, an Indianapolis resident contacted the police and claimed that a local businessman, Herb Baumeister, was the mysterious man photographed leaving the Vogue Theater with one of the I-70 Strangler's victims, Michael Riley. Prior to his suicide in 1996, Baumeister was the prime suspect in the murders of at least 7 men who were killed between 1993 and 1995 in Indianapolis. Those men's remains were found buried on Baumeister's property. After this information surfaced, Baumeister was named the prime suspect in the I-70 Strangler case. According to investigators, he stopped dumping bodies of his victims in 1991 because he had bought the Fox Hollow farm land, and from then on, he would use this as the burial ground for his victims. No physical evidence has linked Baumeister and the I-70 Strangler victims. Ted Fleischer has claimed that Baumeister wasn't responsible for the killings and accused the police officials of police misconduct, saying that they used him as a convenient excuse to close the case ahead of a municipal election while the real serial killer or serial killers remain at large. Right. The man whose land had 7 strangled murder victims buried there couldn't possibly be the I-70 Strangler. It must be that he was set up. These people were real people who did have people who loved them, hopefully. Instead of judging them for where they were when they were taken and kidnapped, we need to understand that things like this go on to this day. And in our judicial system, murderers of prostitutes, of any sexuality, are harder because what they do is a secret. In particular, if you're a 14 or a 17-year-old boy or a girl, it's a secret. So, if you know any information about these crimes, if you've ever heard anybody talk about them, if you've ever heard anything that sounded suspicious or weird or crazy from your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving, please call the police department and give them any clue. These crimes are often solved by the most minute detail that only somebody who had talked to the killer would know. Thank you for coming to my channel, and good night.